wind didn't howl through the forgotten realm. It screamed. Rayan pressed his hands against his ears, but the sound pierced through his fingers like needles of ice. Behind him, Jamal's flashlight beam danced erratically across the ancient cave mouth, its weathered surface resembling a colossal throat ready to swallow them whole. "We shouldn't be here," Tahira whispered, her voice trembling. Her hijab whipped around her face in the unnatural wind. "My grandmother spoke of this place. She said the British explorers who came here in 1924 never returned." Mansour laughed at this, though there was something hard-edged to it. "That is just another fairy tale to drive children away from the caves. We are scientists, not naive villagers." He tightened the geological survey equipment, the metal striking a hollow resonant note that echoed ominously in the failing light. The sun set, painting the desert cliffs with hues of blood and rust. 5 graduate students stood at the threshold of what locals called the gateway to the underworld. None of them wanted to admit how the stories they'd collected over the past week had gotten under their skin. Tales of people wandering into the caves and emerging days later, their minds shattered, babbling about voices that spoke in languages older than human civilization. Wasim consulted his GPS. "The seismic readings are strongest here. Whatever caused those underground tremors last month, this cave system is right at the epicenter." He paused, furrowing his eyebrows as he stared at the screen. "That's strange. The signal's completely dead now." Rayan felt something wet hit his cheek. Wiping it off, he pulled back, smearing red on the fingers. He stared up. This wasn't sunset that made the rocks pink. They were actually weeping blood. "Oh God," Tahira breathed, backing away. The signs, just as in the manuscripts, when the stones weep blood, they are waking. "Who's they?" Jamal asked, but the question was overwhelmed by a vibration that seemed to rattle the bones of every person there. A deep, thrumming hum coming from deep within the cave, like the vibration of some enormous tuning fork struck by some ancient hand. The wind abruptly ceased, throwing them into silence so complete that it felt physical against their eardrums. Then a voice came deep in the cavern. It will haunt their bad dreams forever. A chorus of screams that seemed a collective scream, though thousands had it, which shouted words into an unknown vocabulary their minds failed to comprehend, yet their souls had an understanding with. Scientific skepticism crumbled under the screaming sounds. "Run!" he yelled, but it was too late. The darkness within the cave mouth surged forward like a living thing, engulfing them in its cold embrace. The last thing Rayan saw before the blackness took him was Tahira's face, frozen in a silent scream as ancient symbols began burning themselves into her skin. Their archaeological survey had just become something else entirely, a descent into horrors that had waited millennia to be rediscovered. And in the depths below, something stirred, awakened by their presence after eons of slumber. Consciousness returned to Rayan like water seeping through cracked stone. His head throbbed with each pulse of the strange, phosphorescent light that seemed to emanate from the cave walls themselves. The air tasted ancient, thick with the dust of centuries and something else, something metallic and sweet that made his stomach turn. "Tahira? Wasim?" His voice echoed strangely, coming back to him distorted, as if the cave itself was mocking his calls. As his eyes adjusted, he made out shapes in the darkness, his teammates lying scattered across the chamber floor like broken dolls. Jamal was the first to stir, crawling toward him on hands and knees. "Something's wrong with Tahira," he whispered, voice cracking. "The marks, they won't stop spreading." Now, in the sickly glow of cave walls, Rayan could see the ancient symbols that had burned themselves into Tahira's skin now cover most of her visible flesh, shifting and changing like living things. Her eyes moved rapidly behind closed lids as if trapped in a nightmare she could not escape. Moments later, Mansour and Wasim came to, but their scientific equipment was destroyed, crushed as if by enormous pressure. The cave mouth through which they had entered had disappeared, replaced by smooth, featureless stone that seemed to drink in their flashlight beams. "We have to look for another exit," Wasim said, struggling to keep his voice steady, though it trembled. "These cave networks typically have many—" He stopped in mid-sentence, cocking his head as if listening. They all heard it then, singing. Beautiful, haunting notes seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The melody was impossibly complex, layered with harmonies that shouldn't have been humanly possible to produce. "Don't listen," Mansour warned, but it was too late. The song had wrapped itself around their minds like silken threads, drawing them deeper into the cave system. Their feet moved of their own accord, carrying them down a sloping tunnel that seemed to pulse with that same otherworldly phosphorescence. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber that defied all logic and geology. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, supported by massive columns carved with scenes that made Rayyan's mind recoil. Civilizations that had never existed in any human history book, beings that couldn't have evolved on Earth, rituals that spoke of knowledge humanity was never meant to possess. At the center of the chamber stood a circle of standing stones, all covered in identical shifting symbols that marked Tahira's skin. And at its center— "No," Jamal breathed. "No, this can't be." The thing in the circle had once been human, or at least it wore human skin. But that skin was stretched and distorted over a frame that followed no earthly anatomy. Its head was bent at an impossible angle, and when it straightened to look at them, its face was a writhing mass of features that constantly rearranged themselves. "Welcome, witnesses," it said in Tahira's voice, though she still lay unconscious in Mansour's arms. "We have waited so long for suitable vessels to return to us." The singing grew louder. Now they could see the singers, glassy figures that rose from the walls as if spirits, crystal and shadow, of which the walls were made. Their words constructed in that pre-human tongue, with every syllable of them, more of those burning symbols came to be painted on the team's skin. Wasim shrieked at the first imprint that seared into his body. "Run!" he cried again, this time able to run. He ran back through the path by which they'd come. That awful music pursued him, coupled with the rustle of massive things being pulled across stone. But in the Forgotten Realm, all roads led into darkness, and from that darkness, ancient things waited with infinite patience for their vessels to walk the world once more. They ran until their lungs burned, taking turns at random through tunnels that seemed to shift and change behind them. The phosphorescent light pulsed faster now, like a heartbeat growing more frantic. Tahira had regained consciousness, but her eyes were different. The irises now swirled with the same shifting symbols that covered her skin. "We have to stop," Mansour gasped, leaning against a wall. "We need to think this through logically." His words cut off in a choked cry as the stone beneath his palm softened like warm wax, trying to pull him in. He yanked his hand free, leaving strips of skin embedded in the wall. "There is no logic here," Tahira said, her voice overlaid with others. "Only the old ones, and their hunger for form." She blinked, and for a moment seemed to return to herself. "Please," she whispered. "You have to end this before I become like them. Before we all do." Rayyan watched in horror as the symbols that had begun on Tahira started to appear on his own arms, burning like brands but leaving no marks, at first. Wherever they appeared, his skin became translucent, revealing something moving beneath that wasn't blood or bone. Jamal pulled out his phone, trying to capture what was happening. "If we don't get out of here, someone needs to know—" The screen erupted in a shower of sparks as one of the crystal singers passed through it, its ethereal form now hovering before them. Up close, the creature's transparency revealed internal geometries that hurt to look at, shapes that folded in on themselves in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Its song pierced their minds like needles, and images flooded their consciousness. Vast cities beneath prehistoric seas, beings that dwarfed mountains conducting ritual sacrifices, doorways opening between worlds that were never meant to touch. The gateway was sealed for a reason, Wasim said, his understanding flowing in through the marks that now spread across his chest. They were imprisoned here, and we, oh God, we're not witnesses, we're keys. And out of the tunnel end came this thing, wrapped in human skin and moving in a way that seemed to scream through Rayon's mind. More crystal singers issued from the walls, their chorus building toward some kind of crescendo that seemed to make reality itself vibrate. "The seals are breaking," Tahira declared, her voice now a chorus of thousands. "The old ones remember flesh, and they hunger for it. Through us, they will walk again." The walls started bleeding that very same crimson fluid they'd observed outside. But now they saw it wasn't blood. It was the very essence of reality tearing open, exposing the spaces within spaces where those ancient beings were imprisoned. Mansour, his scientific mind finally shattering under the weight of what he was seeing, began reciting equations, mathematical proofs that seemed to make the air ripple. "The geometries," he babbled, "they're all wrong here. If I can just calculate the right resonance frequency—" The calculations were cut short as the symbols reached his face, burning across his lips and silencing him. But something had changed in the air. The chorus of the crystal singers faltered for a moment, and the thing in human skin took a step back. "The numbers," Rayon realized. "They're afraid of the numbers." He started reciting prime numbers, each digit acting like a discordant note in the horrible symphony. The symbols on his skin burned brighter, fighting against this intrusion of human logic into their domain. For every physics law the old ones cited, they countered with older, more profound ones. Laws that ruled over realities which existed before our universe came into its present form. The cavern was beginning to shift, its dimensions contorting into shapes that no human mind could contemplate. They had run out of time. Soon the marking would be finished, and their bodies would open up to allow horrors that had been locked away since before humanity's first ancestors crawled from the primordial seas. Rayon's throat hurt from a day of repeating numbers, every digit a tiny act of rebellion against the chaos that threatened to claim them. The symbols had spread across his chest now, and with each mark etched into the skin, memories not his own flooded his consciousness. Eons of imprisonment, of waiting, of hunger for form and substance. Wasim had taken up the mathematical defense as well, his archaeological training giving way to half-remembered theoretical physics. "The Fibonacci sequence," he gasped between numbers. "It's like an immune response, human mathematics against their impossible geometries." But Tahira was almost completely gone now, her form beginning to ripple like heat waves off hot pavement. The others could see through her in places, glimpsing the crystalline structure that was replacing her human tissue. When she spoke, her voice resonated with the crystal singer's chorus. "Your numbers are nothing," the chorus spoke through her. "They are but shallow ripples in a deeper ocean of laws that governed existence before your kind learned to count." As if to demonstrate, the very space around Tahira began to fold, creating angles that made Mansour vomit when he tried to track them with his eyes. Jamal had been quietly typing away on his cell phone, which had shattered its screen, but the connection still remained, and suddenly he let out a cry of triumph. "The signal! It is not dead, it is being transformed." He held up the device, which now showed impossible symbols instead of numbers. "They are not just changing us, they are changing our technology, our tools, everything we made to measure and understand the world." A horrible realization dawned on Rayon. "Because our understanding is the seal," he whispered. "Human consciousness, human mathematics, human science. It's what's keeping them trapped. We didn't just find this place by accident. They've been calling to us, waiting for the right minds to corrupt." It was coming again. This thing wrapped in human skin. But this time they could see it. Or perhaps they were becoming like it, their perception stretching to encompass its true nature. A walking paradox, a being of pure information trying to express itself through matter, never meant to contain it. "The marking nears completion," it said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Your forms will be perfect vessels, your minds already touched by knowledge beyond your kind. Through you, we will seed the world with new mathematics, new geometries. Reality itself will transform to accommodate our return." Mansour continued fighting against the symbols now creeping across most of his body. He turned towards Rayan and opened his almost crystallized eyes at him. "The cave paintings," he rasped. "The ones we took pictures of yesterday. These weren't warning signs. These were instructions, a formula, if we just reverse." But before he could get further, his meat turned translucent. The same impossible internal geometries of the crystal singers were beginning to reveal through it. And as his screams harmonized completely with their chorus, his awareness became absorbed within theirs. Other team members pressed up against a wall that no longer felt solid under their hands, as Jamal held up his phone screen to flash the symbols all around them. It was driving maddening geometries, reshaping the cave, reshaping by the numbers into new forms with mathematical constants, twisted into something far older and greater. Amidst the fog of foreign memories and sensations that drenched his mind, Rayan noticed something. The prison of the old ones was not merely physical, but conceptual. They were imprisoned not behind walls of stone, but behind humanity's collective conception of reality. Every scientific law, every mathematical proof, every rational explanation of the universe served to maintain their chains. "That's why they need us," he said, struggling to keep his own thoughts separate from the chorus trying to claim him. "Scientists, researchers, people who understand the old laws well enough to help break them." Wasim, whose skin was now more picture than flesh, grabbed Rayan's arm. The touch sent visions cascading through both their minds. The old one's first imprisonment, when early humans had unknowingly crafted their cage by beginning to measure and define the world around them. The development of mathematics had strengthened those bars, and the scientific revolution had sealed them completely, until now. "If understanding seals them," Wasim managed, crystallizing lips, "then we have to." The sigils reached his eyes and he convulsed, arched into the transformation that was taking him. When he came upright again, his movements were wrong, his joints bending in impossible ways. The chamber was changing more rapidly now, its dimensions expanding to accommodate forms that couldn't exist in normal space. The crystal singer's chorus reached a pitch that shattered what remained of conventional reality around them, revealing the true nature of the Forgotten Realm. Not a cave system, but a wound in the universe, a place where the Old One's prison intersected with the world of humans. Rayan felt his own transformation accelerating, the symbols burning deeper into his being. Soon, he would become like the others, a gateway for horrors to re-enter a world that had forgotten them. Unless only Rayan and Jamal remained human enough to resist now. The others had become something else, crystalline architectures of flesh and geometry that hurt to look at directly. Through the transparent portions of their transformed bodies, Rayan could see new universes being born and dying, mathematical constants evolving into living things. "There's a way," Jamal said, his voice distorting as the symbols reached his throat. "We have to. His eyes rolled back, and for a moment patterns like living things moved behind his pupils. The opposite of understanding. Not ignorance, but... Rayan understood what his friend was trying to say. The Old Ones were imprisoned by human comprehension of reality, by the mathematical frameworks and scientific principles humanity had built over millennia. The solution wasn't to fight them with more equations, but to... "We have to unknow," Rayan whispered. The price of this knowledge was a searing on his skin as the symbols etched themselves deeper into his skin as if to shut up this dangerous thought. Not just forget, but actively reject understanding. Create a void of comprehension they can't cross. The thing that had been Tahira turned its ever-shifting face toward him. "You cannot unmake knowledge," the chorus spoke through her crystalline form. "Your species climbed from ignorance once. The path cannot be untaken." But now Rayan saw it, the flaw in their prison and their weakness. For the old ones needed to be understood by humans, partially at least, to take form in our reality. Their mathematics had to corrupt ours, their geometries over-substitute our physics. Outside that bridge of comprehension, they were only abstract horrors, confined in realms of pure concept. The cave itself seemed to resist his realization, its walls rippling with vindictive patterns. The chorus of the crystal singers rose to a maddening pitch, trying to force understanding back into his mind. But for each mathematical truth they showed him, Rayan forced himself to embrace paradox instead. 2 + 2 = 5, he said, and felt reality shudder around him. Parallel lines intersect. Effect precedes cause. Each sentence was another little rip in the rational fabric that the old ones were trying so hard to sully. On his skin, the symbols began to falter, insufficient to hold on to flesh, unwilling to be held by their underlying logic. Jamal caught on, his scientist's mind fighting against itself to embrace impossibility. The square root of -1 is. The symbols reached his brain, trying to force him to complete the equation correctly. "Is organic, is blue, is the sound of silence." The room writhed in agony, its geometries straining to comprehend these impossible statements. The crystal singers' chorus grew dissonant as their harmonies broke apart like shattered glass in the unraveling of human mathematics locally around the two men. But the old ones wouldn't release their prey easily. They poured knowledge into Rayan's mind, visions of the universe's true nature, equations that could reshape reality, secrets that humanity had spent millennia trying to discover. Each revelation was a hook, trying to drag him back into the realm of comprehension. Tahira's altered body stretched towards him, crystalline fingers thrusting through planes that shouldn't be. "Accept the greater truth," the chorus pleaded, speaking through her. "Evolution awaits. Transcendence beckons." Rayan gazed on his friend's distorted form, made his choice. Knowledge, understanding, science, all of that was precious. But some prices were too dear to pay. He began to laugh, embracing the absurd, the impossible, the irrational. Every bolt of laughter was a denial of logic, a rejection of understanding. The symbols on his skin began to dissolve. They could not endure being constrained to a mind that literally refused to understand them. Reality cracked around Rayan and Jamal as they continued their assault on reason. The walls of the cave wept equations that tried to resolve themselves but could not, causing cascading failures in the fabric of space-time. The chorus of the crystal singers became a cacophony of competing mathematical truths, each one invalidating the others. "A circle has corners!" Jamal shouted, his voice cracking as the last of the symbols faded from his skin. "Time flows sideways! Entropy runs backward!" Their altered teammates flickered like poor signals on bad televisions. In an atmosphere of pure paradox, their crystalline forms couldn't hold their cohesion. Tahira's myriad voices screamed in words that were the language before the beginning of time. But those ancient words became contradictions that unraveled into the sounds of chaos. "You doom yourselves," the thing wearing human skin warned, its form rippling with distress. "Without understanding, your species will fall back into darkness. All your progress, your discoveries, your evolution, undone." Rayan felt a trickle of tears run down his cheek, and they slid uphill. "Not undone," he said, "just temporarily forgotten." Here, now, in this place. He understood at last what the act did. They were not destroying knowledge at all, but building a pocket-local vacuum of comprehension, an infinitesimally small, complete uncertainty sphere where the old ones could not abide. The chamber started crumbling, not as a matter of physical, but more of a concept. Impossible geometries were in a hurry to resolve themselves, while each paradox would reduce the remaining dimensions to fight with. Crystalline singers faded while their chorus rose in panic. "The square circle contains infinite corners," Rayan declared. "The empty set is full. Silence is the loudest sound." With every impossible statement, the transformed members of their team began to change. The crystalline structures which had replaced their flesh began to crack, revealing not blood and bone beneath, but glimpses of their original human forms, preserved in the spaces between corrupted realities. The thing in human skin made one final attempt to restore order. It began reciting the fundamental constants of the universe: the speed of light, Planck's constant, the gravitational constant. But Rayan and Jamal were ready. "Light is dark," Jamal countered. "Gravity repels. Mass is imaginary." The chamber shuddered. The walls started running like melting wax, but instead of showing rock behind them, they showed nothing. Not darkness, not void, but a complete absence of anything that could be understood or measured. The prison of the old ones wasn't breaking. It was rewriting itself into something even they couldn't comprehend. First, Tahira's crystal form broke. The shards disappeared into mathematical noise before they'd hit the ground. Her fleshly form slid to the ground, unconscious and intact. This way, each member of her team, following in succession, their changed meat undoing itself as reason lets go of its hold on that pocket of space. The crystal singers make one final bid to preserve the shape, which becomes a doomed mathematical proof that they themselves must exist. Now, in the pure paradox around them, anything could be arranged. Even some of the fundamentals of reality went up for bidding. They dimmed and flickered out as smoke, dissolving into background static and disappearance. The last thing left was the thing wearing human skin. As reality began to unwind around it, its shape spasmed wildly as it sought some purchase in a universe that made no sense at all. Its face, a living, writhing mass of features, broke into a fleeting expression that might have been fear. "You cannot keep this emptiness to yourself forever," it said, its voice splintering into 1,000 more. "The human brain can't stand uncertainty. You'll start to think again, and when we do, Rayan corrected, the seal will be tighter." He felt the words ring true even as he said them. Because now we know the cost of knowing too much. There are some things that shouldn't be known. Its form began to dissipate, its substance breaking down into increasingly abstract patterns before dissipating entirely. The nothingness that had filled the cave walls began to recede, revealing natural rock beneath, rock that followed the normal laws of geology and physics. One by one, their teammates began to stir. Mansour was the first to regain consciousness, his skin now free of the terrible symbols that had marked them all. He stared at his hands as if expecting them to turn transparent again. "Did we?" He began, and then stopped, unable to find words for what had happened. But the memories were already beginning to fade, slipping away like water through cupped hands. The human mind, designed to seek patterns and create understanding, was actively rejecting the impossible knowledge it had gained. Tahira sat up slowly, and somehow, miraculous thing that it was, her hijab was still in place. "I remember singing," she said softly. "So many voices. They wanted." She shuddered, unable to complete the thought. Wasim checked his GPS unit, which mysteriously began to work again. "We've been down here for 6 hours," he said, his scientist's mind already trying to rationalize what had happened. There must have been some kind of hallucinogenic gas in the cave system, mass hysteria induced by... "Don't," Jamal said sternly. "Don't try to explain it. Not yet." He pushed Mansour upright, deliberately averting his gaze from the dripping walls on which equations had recently wept like blood. Rayan understood. Their rational minds were already working to make sense of what had happened, to fit it into existing frameworks of understanding. It was human nature, this need to explain and categorize, but for now the uncertainty had to remain. They found their way out easily, too easily perhaps. The cave system that had seemed like an endless maze of impossible geometries was now just a series of natural tunnels leading up to the surface. The sun was setting again, painting the desert in normal colors that followed the proper rules of light and optics. None of them wanted to review whatever data it had collected, so their equipment was intact. In silence, without a word, by common consent, they packed up their camp quickly and quietly. The locals who had warned them about the caves continued to watch in the distance, their expression unreadable. That night, in the room safety of their hotel room, Rayan couldn't sleep. He kept catching glimpses of impossible angles in the corners of his vision, caught hearing fragments of that ancient chorus in the white noise of the air conditioning. But each time he tried to focus on these anomalies, they slipped away, refusing to be understood. He found Tahira sitting in the hotel lobby at 3 a.m, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, he saw something shift behind her eyes, a flash of that crystalline intelligence that had almost claimed them all. "We can never tell anyone what really happened," she said. It wasn't a question. "Would you even know how to start?" she asked, moving across from him to sit down. "Already it feels like a dream. The details are unraveling," she said, "like equations with too many variables to solve." She faintly smiled. "Perhaps that's for the best." "But we'll remember enough," Jamal said, materializing at their side. "Enough to know what's at stake. Enough to keep the seal." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the desert cliffs. Somewhere below in the depths of the forgotten realm, ancient beings slumbered again, their prison reinforced not by understanding, but by humanity's newfound respect for the unknown. Mansour and Wasim would go on to publish a paper about the unusual geological formations in the cave system, carefully omitting anything that couldn't be explained by conventional science. Their readings and data, corrupted beyond recovery, were written off as equipment malfunction. But sometimes, deep into the dark of night, each would waken from sleep with dreams alive with impossible geometry and crystalline song. Each would push on, embracing their uncertainty, driving out the imperative to know in order to understand. And this way, kept the seal entire, safe all that world against the day the world came not an inch close to being otherwise unmade in knowing too well. If you enjoyed this tale of cosmic horror and philosophical terror, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that explore the boundaries between knowledge and nightmare. Share your thoughts below. What would you have done in Rayan's position? Would you choose understanding at any cost, or accept the safety of uncertainty? Remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved, some questions better left unasked. But if you have the guts to check out other stories like this one, just hit that subscribe button. Be careful what you wish to know, though.